What's going on, everybody? Tom here with Keto Lifestyle, and thank you so much for tuning into today's video. Now, if you're anything like me and following a ketogenic diet, you probably eat a lot of either, hamburgers, pulled pork, maybe some lunch meats, things that you traditionally put into a sandwich or a bun. And conventional wisdom has been to just drop the bun or wrap it in maybe a lettuce, but lately romaine's been killing people, and sometimes you just get tired of not having a bun. So now, what I'm gonna do is bring you guys a recipe for a ketogenic hamburger bun. Now, the thing I love about this, and that I could never find in any other recipe I've tried for a hamburger bun, is that these actually hold up to moisture. So when your burger is a little bit juicy, you're making pulled pork, it doesn't fall apart. If you haven't seen my Instagram, go ahead and check it out right here. I made a pulled pork sandwich the other day with this, and it held up just fine. So if that sounds awesome to you guys, hang on tight, and I'll show you how to make it. Before we start mixing anything, we're going to need to preheat our oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. That way it's up to temperature by the time our dough is ready. The first ingredient going into the dough is 1 cup of almond flour. Now, I've had some people ask me to do things in grams, so I'm going to stick the scale underneath there. Now we're adding 2 tablespoons of psyllium husk powder. I did forget to tare the scale, and I do that a couple times, but it's a learning experience. Now we're adding 2 teaspoons of xanthan gum. In order to get these things to rise, we're going to use half a teaspoon of baking soda, followed by 1 teaspoon of baking powder. You do need both. Next up is just a pinch of salt. You're going to want to make sure that this is very well mixed and break up all of the clumps of almond flour. In fact, if you pulse it in a food processor, it'll grind it even finer. Now we're going to add half a cup of sour cream. I know this sounds weird, but trust me, the baking soda is going to neutralize the sour flavor, but it's going to keep your buns nice and moist. Now we're going to add 2 large eggs. At this point, grab a fork and mix everything in. You want it to be very, very well combined. You may need to get in here with your hands at some point because the dough is going to get quite thick. At this point, I have rolled it into a ball and noticed that it's a little bit too sticky. So I'm adding 1 tablespoon of almond flour, and I'm going to knead this in. Feel free to add as much almond flour as you need. You'll want it to be the consistency to where if you roll it around in your hands, as I'm doing here, it will barely stick. You don't want large chunks, but you don't want nothing to stick. Just a little bit sticky. Since our dough weighs about 14 ounces and it's going to make 4 buns, we're going to make these into 3.5 ounce balls, or as close as we possibly can. Now that all of your dough is separated, go ahead and take them one at a time in your hand and roll them around until it's relatively smooth. And then flatten it to where it's between 3 and 4 inches wide and about 1/2 inch thick, basically the size of your palm. If you want it to be pretty, go and get your fingers wet and smooth out the surface of it. This will give you that polished finish that you're so used to when it comes to hamburger buns. Repeat this process for the remaining 3 balls of dough. Once they are formed, we're going to want to place them immediately into our oven. This is because baking soda only rises on mixture, unlike baking powder which rises on mixture and heat. So we want to make sure we don't lose the fluff. After 28 to 30 minutes, go ahead and pull them out. You will notice the crust looks a little bit crispy, and there's a very simple solution to that. Take a sheet of plastic cling wrap and grab each individual bun, wrapping them in the cling wrap while they're still warm. The steam is going to soften up that crust. And just real quick, here's an image of one that I went ahead and used water to smooth out the top of, in case you're curious what that looks like. Welcome back, everybody. And now you know what time it is. It is time for the taste testing. But first, let me show you a few things about the texture of these. So that definitely looks like a real hamburger bun now, doesn't it? So, time to taste it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a piece of a bun that I ripped up in that sequence because I don't wanna ruin another one. And let's give it a taste. Now texturally, that feels just like bread. It feels just like a hamburger bun. It's not too eggy. It doesn't really have any kind of like feel to it. It just feels like bread. It has a little bit of sponginess, doesn't fall apart too well, but it definitely feels like a bun. Let's get to the taste. As I mentioned, it doesn't feel eggy, it doesn't taste eggy. You don't get the nuts at all from the almond flour. It really tastes like nothing. There's a little bit of salt from the salt we put in there, but what gives a bun most of its flavor is the yeast. And obviously there's none in this recipe because yeast eats sugar. There's no sugar in here for it to feed on. If you want to add a little bit for flavor, you definitely can do that, but I find that there's no point since I'm just going to be filling this with hamburger or pulled pork or something like that. But it is definitely worth trying. The texture is great. The taste complements whatever you're going to be putting in it. So I think this is a fantastic recipe, and it took me about 12 tries to get this right. So I really recommend that you guys give this a go. But with that, I'm going to close the video. If you like the video, leave it a like. If you have any questions or comments for me, leave them in the comment section. And if you have not subscribed yet, guys, do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, show some love, and I'll see you in the next one.